Hey there, I'm Greg Nicotero.
Hi, my name is Coleman Domingo.
Hi, I'm Denai Garcia. Hi, I am Mo Collins.
Hi, I'm Chad L. Coleman, Tyrese from The Walking Dead, and Cuddy from The Wire, and you are listening to the Cinik Radio Podcast. Here are your hosts, Cinik, Igrihe, and Ryan.
This is episode 108 of the Cinik Radio Podcast, and I'm your host, and now a guy with a slightly better body than Thor, Cinik. And joining me, as always, my co-host, and just a couple of Avengers looking to assemble, Igrihe, Ryan, and Kim. This week, we've stepped through the yellow portals, and we're ready to break down the epic Avengers Endgame. So if you haven't seen Endgame yet, pause the podcast, run. Don't walk to your local Cineplex and see the movie. And you can thank us and listen to the podcast after. So spoiler alert, if that needs to be said. Thanos may be defeated, but evil still lurks around every corner. So don't forget to smash that like button and smash that subscribe button. And if you're a YouTube addict like I am, don't forget to smack around that notification bell as well for all the latest happenings in the Marvel and DC universe every week here on the Cinik Radio Podcast. After 11 years of movie magic spanning 22 films, that's right, 22 blockbusters, the end is here. Well, the end game at least. It doesn't seem like it's been a year since we left our heroes a year ago, and that after suffering a staggering defeat at the hand of the Infinity Gauntlet-wielding Mad Titan Thanos, that cost them half the world's existence, everyone from Spider-Man to Black Panther were reduced to ash, as part of what I like to refer to the ultimate preferred parking program. Can they assemble what's left? Let's talk about it. We open the movie with Clint's family picnic, which is probably the worst I've ever seen, as most of the family goes to dust except Clint, or the best, depending on how you feel about the family. Fun fact about your friend Cinik, I detest picnics almost as much as I hate camping. I worked my whole life to eat indoors and sleep indoors, and I don't want to do either one. Stark is lost in space. If anyone's left it out on the field, it was Tony during the Infinity War. Thanos bested him both physically, strategically, and left him and Nebula on Titan, which is never nice any time of year. It's not even a dry heat. But they were able to find their way into space with their food gone and air running out and nowhere near the closest Bob's Big Boy. Tony has a problem. Ryan, now we know all the founding members of the Avengers are out of contract and their respective roles are pretty much up. But if Tony died during this Lost in Space sequence, would you be mad about it?
Yeah, only because I think we realize if anyone's gonna be sacrificed in the movie, he's among the top choices and among the people that would kind of yield the greatest kind of emotional reaction. But I feel like we want something with greater stakes for him. So I feel like for him to have been the leader of really this entire 22 film franchise and the face of it, for him to go out like that, in the first 10 minutes of a movie without, it'd be different if he died, in that moment in Infinity War, but for it to happen there would be really underwhelming, especially given the weight. So I feel like they, if he's going to go out, it's got to be in a blaze of glory and with greater emotional stakes. So it definitely would have been let down if that was the end for him. Well,
they definitely did a good job at making the danger for him and Nebula kind of real. I don't know if she needs oxygen to survive or not because she's mostly robot, but just the look at Tony, how he looked pretty much emaciated, how, he was having a hard time even speaking into the helmet and saying his goodbyes. It really felt like it could be the end. We all knew that he eventually got out of there. But if, say, they threw us a curveball and he died on the ship and the rest of the movie went on without Tony Stark, I don't know if I would be completely angry about it. I mean, he's had a good run. He started out as a self-involved billionaire and he turned into a superhero. But what was your best guess going into the movie, how you knew he would be saved somehow?
I just saw it coming. We knew after having Captain Marvel that they weren't going to go very far into this movie without having Captain Marvel. So where they were, that was kind of telegraphed to me that Captain Marvel was going to show up. And just the only thing I wasn't sure is how are they going to get him and Nebula back to Earth? And they took literally the simplest route. And it didn't bother me, but the simplest route by just basically having her become the engine and fly him back. I think there might have been some more interesting ways they could have done it, but why not just take the simple way? It worked. It was fine. My only complaint about Captain Marvel is her lack of involvement in the movie because it was very minimal. They made a big deal about putting out her solo movie, and then she didn't do much in this.
Well, Kim, do you think the whole space sequence was just a way to introduce Captain Marvel into the movie?
I think it was an excellent way of them being able to show the amount of power that she can exude and how she can really, truly help even a strong Avenger. I think it was necessary, and it almost showed, there was like that moment where she's just imminent and glowing outside the window, and you see hope in Tony's eyes for like the first time. And I think it was a good way to reintroduce her into this sequence and kind of let people know who may not have seen Captain Marvel that, there is somebody that can assist them with this.
Well, she rescues them and brings them back, and it should be a happy homecoming because Tony didn't die. Nebula didn't die, which, made Rocket happy. But it quickly turned into anger and finger pointing. Was it the obvious PTSD talking, or the near starvation, or was it guilt? Or can we look at the rift between Iron Man and Captain America as not repairable due to the conflict during Civil War?
I think kind of all of the above, outside of, like, I guess maybe the last question. I think he was, there's a bit of guilt. I think for all of them, there's guilt, feeling that they could have done more, but also kind of projecting maybe some of his own guilt and his own failings onto Captain America. So, at the end of the day, I think it was a little bit of everything, and it was not kind of out of character for him, especially kind of being near death. On one hand, you'd expect maybe him to be elated that he is alive, but on the other hand, I think there is that just the horror of what's happened, and the fact that they had an opportunity to fix it, and so in his mind, he's going to seek out whose fault is it, and there's already a rift with him and Captain America, so why not, kind of aim his anger out towards him.
Kim, even if they were all on the same page from Civil War on, even if they put up the Iron Shield around the world, was there any way to prepare for what Thanos brought to the table? I mean, even if they stood united, do you think Thanos still would have won?
I think he still would have won. I think it was, like he said, it's inevitable. I am inevitable. I think the sequence of those events would have still played out the way they would have, regardless of the shield being up. Who's to say that they would have even had enough time to implement something that huge, in such a short time frame before, the end of Infinity War until now? It wouldn't have happened. He would have come probably in mid-construction or something. Who knows?
We get a heartbreaking moment between Nebula and Rocket, who basically, the two of them have lost everything and they quietly hold hands. If any two characters were in odds during Guardians of the Galaxy's movies, it was those two, and it was nice to see them come together. But I guess, being alone will make strange bedfellows. Carol does the team a solid by intergalactically Ubering our heroes home back to Earth. She's met with questions and contempt. The team obviously must be in the dark about the no universe saving without origin film first clause in the Union contract. IG, how do you feel about Captain Marvel and how she fits in with the core team?
I think it right now, just how everything needed to happen for this movie, it felt a little bit forced just because they were trying to put that extra character in there. And that's, Marvel needs to do some of that stuff because we're leaving phase 3. We got one more movie in phase 3 before we go to phase 4. They need to build some to get ready for phase 4 because a large portion of these people are all going to leave. But it works fairly well. It just felt a little bit forced to me. And the biggest problem, like I said earlier, is that Captain Marvel just didn't do enough in this movie. She seems very almost one note as far as everything goes, and we need her to be developed further in a team environment. Like her solo movie was all right, but she needs the whole teamwork aspect, because even in that movie, she was kind of doing most things by herself, even when she was with the team.
Not getting into too many details, Kim, you being our resident expert as far as superhero movies and superheroes in general, and not talking about who died in the movie, but do you feel that the Marvel Universe going into Phase 4 is in a good place?
I just don't know if there's going to be as much loyalty to people. I think there's a huge new audience of, kids that are going to be growing up with the fourth phase of the MCU that are going to fall in love with it, just like, probably we all did. But I don't know. I kind of feel like it's iffy. There was some plot holes and some things that kind of bounced around that didn't follow the comic books. And I think there's some head scratching that's still going on. I don't know.
Well, Ryan, we always talk about what does DC have to do to catch up to Marvel as far as the quality of films, as far as the established characters. Well, it looks like Marvel, for all intents and purposes, now has at least forced contractually to hit the reset button. Do you think this gives DC an opening to kind of make some ground up?
I don't always see it as a DC versus Marvel thing. I think at one point DC saw it as that, and they tried to compete with them. But I think that what Marvel did took a lot of time, a lot of work, and I don't know that they even expected it to be the phenomenon that it's become. And so look, DC is actually doing all right by kind of making instead of trying to focus on a shared universe, they're just focused on making good movies. And you know what? When you focus on making some good movies, you make good movies. And we got Shazam, which is good. I know we're mixed on this, but I think the Joker looks like it might be pretty good. Aquaman, for all its flaws, did really well in the box office, and it seems like they've got Matt Reeves on Batman, so it seems like DC's kind of figuring out that we have these great characters. Let's lean into that and not worry about the shared universe. And so I think I like that DC's not trying to do that. I think Marvel, at some point, it will be competing with Marvel, because you do have the situation where not only did they caught lightning in a bottle with the movies, with the characters, but with the actors and the performers in those roles, and it was just the stars aligned for really phase 1 through 3, and so I think that the fear is when you have something as big and as epic as the kind of Infinity War and Endgame, how do you follow that up? Like, are we going to have another Endgame-like movie that does the numbers that this movie has done already and will do in the box office? Or do they change gears and go for something else? And I think that will be interesting to see kind of how Marvel reacts to the success of these movies and the success of Endgame. But yeah, sorry, it's a roundabout way to answer your question, but I think that, actually more than anything, I think Marvel is going to be competing with their own work for the next 5, 6, 10 years.
Like a late night Taco Bell run after a night of drinking or smoking, the group decides, hey, let's run it back and go get the 4 billion people that Thanos owes us. With the help of their newest super friend, they catch the Mad Titan by surprise, overpower, and disarm him. And I mean literally disarm him. Thor finally goes for the head. IG, did you want to stand up and shout in your best Mortal Kombat voice, flawless victory? Or was that a little too easy and you were like, no, there's no way that this worked that way?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, they could have made this the shortest Avengers movie in history because Thanos is dead now, right? It all just seemed convenient and almost unnecessary, except for it really did kind of push Thor's story pretty well. So it did work, and it worked pretty well. That like 10-second portion of Thor just deciding he's going to cut off his head, I think they could have done it better. I think he could have goaded him a little bit or said something there, but he got very silent. And you could tell that part of that was because he's still reeling from everything, because he feels like if he'd have just hit him in the head the first time, the snap wouldn't have happened. Everybody'd still be around. We'd have lost some people in the actual battle, but we wouldn't be where we're at. It's a tricky balancing act, but maybe on further viewings I'll like it a little bit better. But right now, it's still kind of working on me a little bit.
Yeah, that sequence was interesting because I physically looked down at my watch to see that only about 20 minutes of the movie had gone past. And I'm like, all right, this is supposed to be 3 hours long. So what are we doing now? And we find out that he informs them that he used the stones to destroy the stones because it was just too tempting to use the time stone to go back and recast Captain Marvel to a much more likable actress. And then reality sets in. He claims he's inevitable right before Thor lobs his head off. Kim, some very un-Thor-like behavior. Is the difference between a hero and a villain a blunt or an edged weapon?
It was really an interesting sequence. He's never said any kind fatherly type words to Nebula. So for him to say, maybe I misjudged you, or maybe I didn't give you enough credit, or whatever that specific line was, he was like trying to have a moment there, and you see Nebula close his eyes after the head's been lopped off. Part of me almost feels as if, though, it's a different Thanos from a different timeline.
Ryan, we know Thanos is a man of conviction, but would any villain give up that type of power for any reason?
Did any villain give up that type of power? Yeah, sure. I think because he wasn't, in his mind, he's not a villain. It's not about power. Flawed as his plan was, it's about restoring some sense of order and balance, to the universe. In his mind, he's kind of almost, a benevolent leader, and that he was changing the world for the better. So, in his mind, I really don't think it's power. I think he sees it as him kind of righting, the wrongs of the universe in line with his character and the character they developed, and that he's the hero of his own story. It's just at the expense of half the universe.
Well, I'll put you in his shoes, IG. I mean, you're a lab accident away from being a supervillain. Would you give up the Infinity Gauntlet if it was your life's work?
No, I'm not giving that up. There's just too many things that can happen, especially like once you've encountered the Avengers, there's got to be some other things like that in the universe that you've run across. Universe is a big place, and we've seen the Guardians of the Galaxy, we've seen the Kree, we've seen all these things that have different abilities. And you just decide, well, I killed half, so now I'm going to destroy this and hang out on this planet where they can just come do whatever they want to me. It just seems pretty short-sighted. So, yeah, if I've got the Infinity Gauntlet, I'm at least going to keep a couple of the stones around so that I can protect myself, or maybe go back in time and change some minor things. So maybe Time Stone, Reality Stone, Power Stone. I may not keep all of them. Maybe I use it to destroy a couple of the stones so that nobody else can undo what I've done. But I'm not going to just give it all up because I have my mission accomplished, because maybe not.
Anyone else think it's funny that everyone just believes him? He says,
Rhodey
I got rid of them.
I don't think Rhodey did, because he's like, and then that's why Nebula says, my father's not a liar. Yeah, Rhodey kind of called him on it, like, they could be here anywhere. And she's like, well, my dad's a lot of things, but he's not a liar.
But he could be. Men of power will say and do whatever they need to in order to protect themselves. So, I mean, what's to say that there's not, maybe he did use the time stone or something. Maybe that's why they picked up the reading on the radar that, a stone was being used.
Well, except it wasn't a stone being used. It was the gauntlet.
It could have been a combination of, yeah.
But that's what put out that big cosmic thing.
Well, listen, I try to live a life of honesty, but if you see me eating a Reese's peanut butter cup and you ask me if there's another one in the package, I'm going to tell you there's not, that I ate the other one already. I'm going to straight out lie to you because I'm not sharing.
I think from practically speaking, sure. Like I thought the same thing. I was like, okay, he's probably lying, but I think just from a writing standpoint, it was kind of your standard. All right, how do we make it so that we don't have to write in, 10 minutes of them trying to prove that he's telling the truth? So between Nebula saying that he's not a liar and and I also took it as like that the amount of energy that was released, was something that in their minds might be, okay, well, how much energy would it take to destroy all the Infinity Stones? All right, maybe that's it. And so I just kind of, you take it for what it is and be happy that as much as I love the movie, that this movie wasn't 3 hours and 10 minutes because they had to explain to us, or show us that he, in fact, did destroy. I guess another thing they could have done is just had him destroy it in the moment when they arrived, maybe, but then how do they find Thanos? So, I was like, for a lot of this movie, where I would typically kind of nitpick, there was a lot of movie I'm like, you know what? I just got to go with it. Just got to go with the science. Just got to go with some of these things and just ride the wave, because there were definitely some big nitpicky moments. But it's like the story. I know the story they're trying to tell, and it's like, let's just go with it.
We jumped to 5 years later, and I know it was 5 years later because they showed it big bold letters on the screen. But the world is in total ruins, and the people that are left aren't in much better shape. I mean, it being New York, we had to fly over Citi Field where the Mets sort of kind of play baseball, or at least used to, and the roads are cluttered with cars and trash. I get it. The snap was like 9/11 4 billion times over. You still have half the world's population left. IG, do you feel that it would be like it would be in Endgame, or 5 years later would life start to return back to normal?
I think there would have been a lot more normalcy than they're showing. First of all, there's always people that are looking for ways to make money. And even with tragedy and everything, I mean, I remember them selling commemorative plates and stuff after 9/11 happened. So to say that there's not baseball and other things going on anymore, I find that hard to believe, because people are going to crave some kind of detraction from everything that's happened. And 5 years is a long time. You're going to need life to continue. I mean, things are going to have to happen. And obviously some things are happening, like the necessary things like farmers and everything are apparently still doing their job because nobody looks like they haven't eaten in 5 years. So I had a hard time kind of leaning into that a little bit, but I just they didn't spend a lot of time on it. So I was able to just kind of drive by, but it was still one of those things where really we're not creating anymore. There's no movies or sports or anything for people to have a momentary just get out of my life and enjoy something for a little bit. It just seemed like people were holding on to it a little too hard. And I understand that, this really affects everyone. There couldn't have been anyone left that didn't get affected by this. But that's, especially what we've seen in our world, when you have tragedy strike, that's when people rally together and lift everything up. So I think they'd have been having more go on. I mean, I was pretty upset seeing Citi Field just kind of basically wasting away to nothing.
It's wasting away to nothing with the Mets playing there anyway. Cap's turned grief counselor, at least for half of the Russo brothers. Maybe the other one went up in smoke. The message was grow from it and move on. Easy for him to say he had no family that was lost in the Big Bang, but still, Nat is a complete mess and looks like her hairdresser was half done when the event happened, and Hawkeye has gone full Ronin, killing every underworld boss that moves due to the loss of his family, and the fact that he's been minimized for the first 2 movies of the Avengers series. Kim, putting yourself in Clint's position, what would push you over the edge more, the loss of your loved ones or being less important in these movies than Bucky and Brody?
That's my loved ones, of course, but in Clint's position, I'd be a little bit irritated that his narrative hasn't been fulfilled yet.
Yeah, that would definitely annoy me as well. Him saying Hawkeye at the beginning of the movie was the first time his name was ever spoken throughout any of these movies. That's how small of a character he's been. And on the grand scheme of things, when we started IG, Jeremy Renner is up there as far as accomplishments with all the actors in these series. Why do you think they didn't do more with Hawkeye?
I think it just leans on the powers and the interesting nature of all the other people that were involved. And you can argue that, like, Natasha, Black Widow, doesn't really have any power. And she doesn't. But she looks nice in her black outfit, and that's more interesting than whatever Jeremy Renner was wearing as Hawkeye, as Clint Barton. And that's what got her more time on the screen. Because, I mean, we did get Hawkeye all the way back into the first Thor movie, and he did a great job in everything he's done. And Jeremy Renner is a good actor. I think Hawkeye is the weakest of the characters that they've put into the MCU so far as what he's able to do. I mean, he's just a guy who's really good with a bow and arrow. He's not anything special, and bow and arrow isn't, I mean, guns are technically better because it's really hard to get out of the way of a bullet, where it is possible with a bow and arrow. It's just one of those things where it's just, it puts him in a difficult position, but I'm glad that they gave him time, that they put him in there, and that they are making this so real that, Hawkeye was an Avenger, and not everybody has to be an overpowered or super rich or anything else to be a part of this group that really cares and is willing to do things for the world. And they were able to bring him back. And so, yeah, it was a little bit disheartening that they didn't give him bigger roles and everything that was going on. But I think that given what he's able to do, he was given the appropriate amount of stuff.
Not since Master Splinter has a rodent done so much good for the world as a rat, by the way, the MVP of the movie, releases Ant-Man from the quantum realm, who's been there for the last 5 years. The world has ended, and he missed it. Seeing his name on a memorial, he rushes to try to find his daughter. And actually, for me, that was the first occasion of the feels, watching him run and try to find his daughter. Ryan, does it speak to the likability of Paul Rudd that I was instantly invested in his search for his daughter? And would you have rather faced the horror head on and been there when the snap happened and seen people turn to dust? Or would you rather play catch up 5 years later and find out that most of your loved ones are gone?
Let's answer your the second question, I guess first. I'd rather be there. I think you can, it's got to be a shock to, arrive and then just be disoriented by what's going on. And if anything, it's almost a little unbelievable because it's definitely a moment that gives you the feels, but it's such a shock and it's so sudden for him. I mean, it's only a few hours that. I don't know. It's hard to say whether how disoriented he'd be, how emotional he'd be, because he really didn't miss his daughter. He just kind of, and wouldn't he have just gone home to her home first? So a few parts were just a little weird to me. But yeah, I think part of, not to get too much into the earlier question on Hawkeye, but yeah, I think part of it is Paul Rudd is a very likable actor. I think that Jeremy Renner is a great actor, but I don't know that, as Hawkeye, he's a bit muted in the role, and he also just haven't been given much to work with. I think Scarlett Johansson's been given way more to work with throughout the movies. She's been in more movies, and so she's had a lot more time for her character to develop. So where she hasn't had a solo movie, she's had a lot more time and been given more to work with, where I think Jeremy Renner just hasn't been given much to work with, and he's been in fewer movies. And, not to mention that we have Arrow, which, say what you will about a lot of the DC TV shows, like Arrow's done really well. So, I think that takes a little steam out of a character when you do have a successful character with similar powers. So I think Paul Rudd just oozes charisma and is perfect in that role. And yeah, instantly, like, you're taken to a point where, okay, I'm rooting for this guy. I want to be in for the ride.
Well, even though he's not a scientist or a time travel expert, Lang did stay at a quantum Holiday Inn Express. He seeks out the remaining Avengers with the idea of using the quantum realm as a plot device to time travel. But the catch is they need Tony Stark to do it, whose life seems to be the only one in the world that's actually gotten better in the last 5 years, as he's now a dad, a husband, and his superhero days seem far behind him. Iron Man is willing to take a firm pass on the time heist. IG, it didn't make much sense to me. I mean, someone like Tony Stark, it's not in his DNA to stay out of a fight or accept the wholesale ass whooping lying down, is it?
It really isn't. And I mean, it plays out that way momentarily, but I think it might have even been the same night when he's in there just deciding, hey, I just did the dishes, see a picture of Peter Parker. Let me take a swipe at this real quick. And 10 minutes later, he's solved the entire conundrum, which is hilarious. Like, if you really think about it, like, they had already brought in Professor Hulk. He couldn't figure it out. They had Ant-Man, who works with quantum realm type stuff already and has had experience with it. He can't figure it out. And with the little bit of information they gave Tony Stark, he figures it out, thinking about it while he washes dishes. It just seems a little far-fetched, but hilarious at the same time. So that's going to be the catalyst to bring him back in. Like, there's a way that we can undo a large portion of what's happened, but we need you. And he's like, well, no. Okay, yeah. That's a standard Tony thing to do anyway, is to make it look like you're not interested and then go do it anyway.
Yeah, it's almost like the problem was enough to draw him in. Not even the conflict, but the trying to figure out time travel is enough for Tony Stark to be like, all right, I'm going to put my wife and kid aside, at least for now, to try to go figure this out. Kim, it seems like the Avengers have turned into somewhat of a defunct rock band who refuses to tour together, as Hulk and Rocket go to New Asgard to find the now fattest Avenger. Okay, what's the deal with Thor? Is he the world's biggest emotional eater, or has he just watched The Big Lebowski too many times?
God, I hated this. I hated the way that they turned him into just a laughing stock of, like a comedic outlet for the movie. It was funny for like 2 seconds, and then I was totally over it. Like, after, there's a scene later where he gets Mjolnir and he slams it to the ground or whatever. The lightning strikes, his hair's braided, and then that's it. The gut's still there. I don't understand why they had to continue with that persona of him throughout the entire movie. It just didn't sit well with me. There's a few things in this movie that didn't sit too happily with me.
Well, Ryan, is this a case of taking something good too far? I mean, we introduce him in the Avengers, and all right, he's Thor, and he's a Nordic god, and he's serious, he's very Shakespearean, and this is why people really don't love him as a character. We go to Dark World, and he's kind of the same, but he's coming out of it. We go to Ragnarok, and now he's a funny guy. He's got short hair, ha ha ha. It's a good time. But have they gone too far with Thor? I mean, could they just cast Robin Williams at this point?
I see where you guys are coming from with it, but I disagree a bit, because I think that for the first of all the Avengers, of all the MCU movies so far, the first two Thor movies are easily my least favorite. Maybe Iron Man 3 is up there, but I just didn't like the character. I didn't like him as Thor. He was kind of boring. He was trying too hard. And from Ragnarok, I mean, he that is the character. I mean, he's hilarious. And I think they're really leaning into as an actor what he can do. And I just thought it's the comedic thing is great, and that's really, he's got great chops. And so maybe they leaned a little heavily into this change and the fat suit and everything, but I thought it was hilarious, and I thought it was I would wonder what the physics are. Can gods kind of let themselves go that much? But again, I'm willing to go with it. It works for comedic effect to me, and again clearly, as we see as things go on, they're not done with him, from that perspective. So I was okay with it. I would hope that down the line maybe he gets back to his old form. But I found it it was funny to me. Maybe it was a little much, but it didn't really it wasn't off-putting for me at all.
Well, now Odin didn't really look like he was peak physical performance, so why can't they let themselves go a little bit? And he is a god. Does he have to look like a god to make it happen? Plus, think about the cosplayers this opened everything up for. Like,
oh my god,
some of us little heftier guys can now play Thor, and that's going to be great for us.
Well, that always made me laugh when I see the cosplayers, because they always look like the superhero if they let themselves go. So Thor has kind of become a cosplayer of himself. Even though we saw the movie thousands of miles apart, I knew that you were smiling, because the movie is full of fan service moments, but you had to be happy to see Korg, Meek, and Valkyrie still very much alive, right?
Oh, I was super pumped that they were still there. I thought it was hilarious that Korg and Meek are playing Fortnite, and I just couldn't believe he's like, and then he comes and he kind of cries like his kid crying to dad, you're making fun of me online again.
The kid is back.
Thanks, though. And it was really good, because that's one of the things that really concerned me. Like Meek, not as much, except that like Meek is kind of like a ventriloquist puppet for Korg. He just kind of holds him as like, I'm Korg, this is Meek. Meek doesn't say much or do much, but he's there. And the fact that he's still there just like really made me happy. And Valkyrie being there, it was really good, because we had lost a lot just from Ragnarok with everything going on with Hela. We had lost, all of Thor's counterparts when he was going on his adventures in the earlier movies. They're all dead. I'm just glad that we got some of the newer characters that they'd given us in the last Thor movie, and it really did make a world of difference. And it's fan service. They served very little purpose in this whole movie, except that, ooh, look, Korg is there, and that was enough.
The Wi-Fi has no password, obviously. Kim, lastly, we have Bruce Banner, who seemed to merge his personality into a smart Hulk. Were you with Valkyrie when she said, I liked both halves of your personality more before? Did Hulk lose a step, in your opinion, in Endgame?
I think if this was just Marvel and that question was being asked, I'd say absolutely. I think that the character is, it's not well suited with the storyline. But I know also that Disney wants to try to find a marketable niche. And he's the guy, his name?
Mark Ruffalo.
Thank you. Mark Ruffalo. Since he's kind of not renewing his contract, to the best of my knowledge, I think that this is a good way for them to retain the likeliness of of the Hulk, and continue to market him, because he's relatable to people. Generally, people are familiar with the image. I think that it's a clever marketing step on behalf of Disney, knowing that they're going into, the assumption of this realm.
Ryan, did you find that whole situation as off-putting as I did, or did you think that this just screams cartoon all over it? He's taking selfies, he's flexing, he's dabbing and telling people to listen to their moms. Could we get a smart Hulk cartoon before we get a Hulk movie again?
It was a little silly, but hey, that's part of the comedy in these movies, and some of it works, some of it doesn't. Some will work for me, some will work for you. So I was okay with it. I thought, I feel like the CGI was not quite there. Like something was off with it, and obviously it's not going to be perfect, but it's clearly like it's kind of cartoon Mark Ruffalo, and I never felt like it was a real tangible thing. So if anything, that was a little bit more off-putting than anything else, but I was fine with the comedy. Again, like these movies, they do a good job of balancing the stakes, but there's always going to be the comedy in it. And again, some of it works, some of it doesn't. And so for me, that was a little cheesy, but it was fine.
I think they just softened him up a little bit too much. Like his green wasn't as green. He didn't seem quite as big. He had like a bunch more chest hair. There's just a lot of things that kind of put us off. Like we're not used to seeing Hulk in a certain way, and now we're seeing him like this, and speaking in very fluent sentences, but then it was, like you said, a little off-putting watching him, be like, hey, drink milk, listen to your mom, do your homework, It was a little odd. It was a little weird, but, having read comics for a bunch of years when we got Professor Hulk, I mean, the fact that he can coexist as Banner and Hulk at the same time is super beneficial to the group.
I just didn't feel the sense of urgency when I seen him run into a battlefield or do anything in the movie. It just bothered me a little bit because he didn't seem like the Hulk anymore. I guess that's what I just couldn't get over, and the fact that a superhero needs to wear glasses to see rather than as a disguise. The time heist allows us to revisit the past movies and areas from long ago. Some great stuff from the first Avengers movie, especially for comic book nerds like us, like a nod to Cap being a Hydra agent from the comics, and the Cap versus Cap showdown, where we got to hear about America's ass, and the fact that the Hulk hates cardio just as much as I do when he's forced to take the stairs. But we can't mess with time without it messing back. Loki now has the Tesseract again and is free in that timeline. Ryan, there's been rumors of Loki having his own show on the Disney Plus streaming network when it starts. Do you think this was a plot device to kind of get him out and free in the world? Yeah, I wonder, you kind of makes me think of like a chicken or the egg moment. Like which came first? Like, did they say, we're doing a Loki movie. Oh crap. How do we make this work? Or did they come up with this and then decide? But, clearly it's tied to Loki movie. And I think very clearly, it will, somehow be related. Yeah, it was a little cheesy, but I'm sure for most of us that was the first thing that sprang to mind. But like a lot of that scene itself was kind of was done really well, and it was pretty funny. And I think they really, to me, it hit its stride at that point where they were doing the kind of time traveling where and taking us back to some of the older things. Like that was fun to see things from just a slightly different angle, or just see aspects of the movie that obviously had to happen, but we're not privy to. Was a lot of fun, and I think it was really hitting its stride. And when it gets to that point where they're kind of split up but going all over, and we're revisiting things from earlier movies. After losing the Tesseract, it forces Rogers and Stark to go even further back into the past, into the 70s, to regain it. Tony encounters his dad, and there's a heartfelt conversation between the two. Kim, we've spoke during the week, and you said that there's a comic storyline that doesn't quite line up here. Could you explain it to me? Yeah, so in the comics, which I have all of them, and I've gone back and I've flipped through it, Tony Stark is adopted. He was never the biological son of Howard Stark. He was adopted. His birth date is like in February. Tony asks him, "Oh, your wife's expecting. When is she due?" Like, he's got this real inquisitive look on his face, and he's like, "Oh, she's like, I don't know, 6 months along now, and we're already in October, later off in the year." So you see him doing the math in his head that the numbers aren't adding up. It's 1970, and my mom is pregnant, but it's obviously not with me. And in the comics, Howard Stark, Tony's parents, they adopt. First of all, they have the son. His name is Arno, and Tony asks Howard, "What are you going to name him? Do you have any names picked out yet?" And he goes, "I'm probably going to name him Arnando or something," which is, Arno is short for, what they ultimately end up naming their son. But the son is born. He's riddled with disease. He's got handicaps. He's in an iron lung for the majority of his life. And he spends his entire childhood and entire upbringing reading and absorbing knowledge like a sponge. And he becomes this super hyper knowledgeable character, and he in the comics ends up being the one true Iron Man. And I think there's that pivotal moment where he's having this interaction with his dad. He knows that
something didn't add up correctly. Maybe he's hoping that, Howard was just not paying attention to his wife. And after all, he is bringing her flowers and sauerkraut, I think he said, and maybe he's hoping he's wrong. But at the end, he gives him a hug and says, thank you for everything that you've done. And then realizes, he doesn't know who the hell I am, and lets him go pretty quick. And then you see Jarvis and Howard, getting into the car and heading out. Have I met him before? Do I know him? Oh, you see a lot of people. What a great moment for me. I was giddy. I was like in the theater clapping like, I knew this. I had this narrative lined out like long before the movie previews ever came out.
Well, even if they don't head in that direction, it is at least a nice nod to the comic books. Do you think that, because Howard seemed like very much like a doting father pre-baby, but then when Tony came, they didn't always get along so well. Do you think part of that is the fact that Tony might be adopted? Absolutely. I think that Tony, they were very selective in the adoption process, and they chose a kid that had, eyes and hair color, somebody that would look like them, hopefully, when he got older, and somebody that came from, a smart family or well-educated, well-to-do. And I think that there may have been a lot of butting heads, like in the comics, they would fight all the time, mainly because Howard doesn't have the close connection like he does, with his biological son. So I think there's a whole narrative there where Tony kind of grew up having daddy issues and always needed to prove that he was one step ahead or could do better than. And it really benefited to his own character. It was a really nice moment. I mean, you could tell that it touched Tony Stark deep. And if you could go back in time and have one conversation with a loved one that you've lost, who would it be and what would you talk about?
Man, that's a good question. Probably my dad again, and anything. My dad passed away about 6 years ago. So I'd just be happy to have another conversation with him. Just he had a lot of knowledge, and he had a lot of BS in his air too. Like he'd say he did things that there's no way he ever did, or that he could do things that there's no way he could have ever done. But he was still my dad, and a lot of who I am is directly attributed to him. So, yeah, if I'm going to go back, that's probably who I'm having a conversation with.
It kind of made me feel the same way, because as I was sitting there watching that, I was thinking it would have to be my grandfather for me, because 90% of who I am today is a result of him, a result of his personality and his guidance and his upbringing. And to talk to that guy about anything, because he knew a little bit of everything, would just make me smile. And more so, I would love to tell him what's going on in the political climate right now and who our president is, because he would absolutely lose his mind. Ryan, we had a lot of returning side characters like Renee Russo as Thor's mom, Natalie Portman as Jane Foster, Robert Redford as Alexander Pierce, and Tilda Swinton as the Ancient One, Doctor Strange's mentor. What was your favorite scene from the Reclaiming the Stones sequence, and who was your favorite callback character? I'm going to say the Cap versus Cap fight. Just that whole sequence was really, really well done. I think the fight between them was really well done. The way it was shot, the action was fine. The action was really cool. The moment where he sees the locket, and kind of, it was kind of a genuine reaction. And then, it still had the comedy, later on with the Hulk. So I would say that's the scene that was the most fun for me. But there was, definitely some with higher emotional stakes. Obviously the Stark reunion, had great emotional stakes, and even the Thor scene, even though I hated the Dark World, I think that scene itself was effective. So it's hard for me to pick a favorite, but I'd say overall I think the Cap versus Cap fight and just in New York was a lot of fun. Oh, my absolute favorite, and it wasn't really bringing back a callback character, but going to, what was it, Morag, where Peter Quill was going to get the Infinity Stone in that basically decimated place, and there are War Machine, and he's there, and he talks to goddamn, what's her name? Nebula. And he talks to Nebula, and he goes, "So he's an idiot." And I was just dying watching that. That was my favorite, because it's like, I remember when Guardians of the Galaxy first came out, and I was in a theater, I was watching it, and I was just having so much fun watching him dance around and sing his song during that scene. And to see it from an outsider's perspective, where he's just got headphones on and he's kicking those space rats around and singing all to himself.
Terrible karaoke.
It was hilarious to watch. And so that was my absolute favorite. But then the emotion from Chris Hemsworth as Thor, being able to see his mother again, and she had more lines in this movie than she did in the other two combined. having him have that moment with his mother, that just jerked tears right out of my head. It was terrible and awesome all at the same time.
I was really excited to see Jane Foster. It took me a minute because I had to think, was this just a recycled clip from the previous movies or whatnot? When the stones go back into their proper timeline, it makes you wonder, how did Doctor Strange put the stone back on Vormir? And if that's the case, then did he put the ether back in Jane's head? There's so many different directions that this could have taken. And when you were just talking about Nebula and War Machine, when they go back to Vormir, all four of them, Hawkeye, Black Widow, War Machine, and Nebula, they land on Vormir and then they split up. Two of them go and they jump in a ship and then they fly somewhere else. And my first thought was, well, hell, couldn't a lot of this narrative been cut down, maybe save some time if instead of all of them going together, they just went to the proper place that they needed to go to? Couldn't they have gone there the moment that Thanos collects the Soul Stone, after Gamora dies? Couldn't they have just grabbed it at that point? Why did she even have to die?
It wouldn't be nearly as entertaining. There was a lot of humor in those events, like the Cap as a Hydra agent, because they were about to relive that elevator fight from Winter Soldier, which is just an epic fight. I love the Cap versus Cap when the present day Cap tells him that I can do this all day, and he just rolls his eyes. He's like, I know. There was a lot of great humor in those events, but the more heartfelt stuff, if anybody needed to talk to their loved ones, it was definitely Stark, and it was definitely Thor, and it kind of got their characters a little more back on track and focused on what is important, and probably closed the door on Tony's wondering if my dad actually loved me or not, even though it opens up more doors for what you brought up, Kim. On the same planet, we lost Gamora. We lose Black Widow. After 10 minutes of arguing and wrestling over who's going to sacrifice themselves, Nat wins by losing, much to Clint's dismay. Ryan, did the scene hit the right emotional impact to you, or were you ready to trade them both for the stone and Gamora back?
Oh, yeah. Well, I definitely trade them both for the stone and Gamora back. Yeah, I think that was one of the few scenes that doesn't quite hit that the way that I think they wanted it to. I don't quite buy their relationship or friendship or whatever it is, and that they're both here they are fighting to save the world, but then they're fighting each other to sacrifice each other, and there's that point where they're both hanging. It's like, well, great, both of you are going to die, and then nobody gets a stone, and so it just, that part didn't make much sense to me, and definitely didn't hit the mark. I was fine. It was like, you could toss a coin. I probably prefer a Black Widow, but you could toss a coin. I didn't really care. I think they tried to do some justice to their characters, but it just wasn't working. I think they hadn't built on the ground that they did with Tony Stark and with Steve Rogers. Like they didn't do the work for them that they, the same kind of work they did for those characters over the course of the last, again, 22 movies. So I just didn't feel this. There weren't the same stakes. Just didn't feel the same. And so it just felt like, okay, this is tacked on. And if you wanted to cut some time, we'd have cut some time from them. So yeah, I'm okay with, it is what it is.
Yeah. We were in a room full of people, Ryan, and there was very, very little reaction to that whole sequence of events. Like, she's been in quite a few of the movies now. They both have, and it could have been either one, and I don't think it would have affected anybody in any way. Sitting to the very right of us was a super feminist that would mark out every time Captain Marvel was on the screen, and she could care less about Black Widow going over that cliff. I don't know if there was a way that you were going to get people to care about these characters or care about that sequence of events. IG, you're kind of a conventionalist like I am. The time heists work, and they were able to reset everything with a snap of the fingers, and life returns. Now, I know we need to suspend disbelief here, but how much of a strain would it be on the world if 4 billion people just suddenly appeared again?
Yeah, that would be a little bit rough, because in a 5-year span, literally everything is adjusted to there being half as many people. How are they going to ramp up food production and everything else at this point? Because, okay, so if half the people died, half the farmers died too. So nobody's creating that much food because they didn't need to. There weren't people around that you needed to feed. There wasn't a power grid as large that needed to be maintained. A lot of things going on that I think that if you sit down and think about it, it really becomes problematic. And that's the issue with this, is that they just kind of say, okay, we're going to bring them all back. And yeah, everybody gets to have their loved ones back, but how many of them are going to die of starvation in the next 6 months because there simply isn't enough food on the planet for them to eat? Unless they've been stockpiling, but you can only stockpile certain things because everything else will spoil. It's a problem, and that's just the food problem. I mean, there's other problems that go into that as well. I mean, literally, like, some of the people that come back are going to be people that either had power, were government officials, were rich people, or whatever, that those things aren't there anymore, or they can't just step back in because a new government has been formed. You don't get to be president or congressman or whatever, and now what do? The world has moved on without you, and things are happening. It's going to be difficult.
We can't even get the populace to believe that the Earth is round anymore. There's no way that these dust, or at least former dust people, are going to believe that they've been gone for 5 years and somehow they turn to dust. It's all a government conspiracy. Things are back to normal for about 30 seconds until Thanos discovers their plot. Thanks, Nebula. She ruins everything. She really is Marvel's answer to Meg from Family Guy. And the Mad Titan comes to Earth in modern times with his army and his children and vows to strip the world to the bone. The battle between Cap, Thor, and Iron Man was just epic. It was straight out of a comic book, and it included callbacks from all the way from Thanos breaking Cap's shield, and the Mad Titan was about to force Stormbringer through Thor's chest when Cap wields the God of Thunder's hammer like a pro. Kim, did you completely fangirl out when the hammer returned to Steve Rogers' hand?
I was so excited. I was so excited. Like, I can't even begin. Like, there was cheering in the crowd. You guys watched it in Times Square, I think. So I don't know what the general consensus was, or I don't know if everyone fully follows, that storyline, but if there's anyone more worthy of, anything in the MCU, it's Cap, and there's a line earlier in the movie where Rocket says, yeah, he tells Tony, he's like, you're only smart on Earth, or you're only the smartest guy on Earth, or whatever. And, it kind of got me thinking. I'm like, well, here they are. They're on the spaceship and they're heading to their next destination. And, has he ever been in space before? No. So he's only a hero on Earth, and for him to be able to yield that and control it in all of its glory, it was just a magical moment for me. I got goosebumps. I loved it.
Ryan, not only could he wield it, not only could he lift it, but he could use it to maximum offensive potential. What did you think of that scene, and did you think that anybody other than Thor would ever be able to use that hammer?
Well, having known a little bit of background with the comics, I knew I didn't think they were going to do it in this movie, so it came as a huge surprise, and yeah, I think people were freaking out a bit when we saw it, and it was a great moment, I think, and again, it was kind of a fitting conclusion to his fitting aspect of the conclusion to his character, that it really between that and kind of what we get at the end, it was a great send-off for him, and a way to say, like, showcase kind of how important he was to the MCU, how important he was to the world, and that he was really more than just another, more than just a man, and in some ways he was more than just a steroid super soldier, because I think part of his his powers come from effectively kind of steroids, but it's a way to say, like, there was more to him than just him being injected with some stuff, and we knew that to an extent, as far as the drive that the character has, but I think that was a great way to kind of send him off as, like, he was every bit a superhero as Thor, or as anybody else, and so I thought the scene was great. It played off great. It was cool to see even Thor's reaction, and how excited he was about it. So I really loved the way they worked that in.
Yeah, not much in movies have ever been able to elicit a physical reaction from me. I go to concerts and I'll bob my head, but I won't jump around. I'm not screaming lyrics. But when that happened, I literally screamed, fuck yeah, because it was one of the most exciting things that's ever happened in any one of those movies, and unexpected. I didn't think in a million years that was going to happen, and when it did, I just thought it was awesome. I've always loved Captain America, and I always thought he's not cool like Tony Stark. He does what's right. An awesome character, but I always felt that people never gave him the respect due. So seeing him wield both of the shield and the hammer at the same time, I marked out a little bit as D&D fan, just seeing him kind of abuse Thanos with the hammer. I thought it was great. IG, give me your theory on why Steve Rogers was able to wield it when during Age of Ultron, he wasn't even able to budget or pick it up.
He was able to budget. It did move a little bit when he went to go pick it up in Age of Ultron. And I remember the scene because Thor watched it move a little bit, and the look of, oh my God, he's going to be able to pick it up kind of went across his face until he couldn't. Why he was able to do it now is he had been through enough and he had shown enough worthiness that, you know, the hammer with its magical properties will only let you wield it if you're worthy. And he is now fully into, I'm worthy to wield this. Now, my only question is, why is he not in charge of Asgard now? Because, you know, right? That's what's supposed to be happening. If you can wield Mjolnir, you are now the ruler of Asgard. So, you know, step aside, Thor. We have a new king in town.
Kim, I know you've read the internet theories. What do you think?
We were talking about this the other night, actually. Thor just randomly hands over New Asgard to Valkyrie. She was a drunk. She abandoned Asgard to begin with. And, you know, if the Cap is worthy of holding the hammer, then when Thor says, you know, Asgard already has a king, when he's talking to Valkyrie, how do we know he's not talking about Cap? Yeah, maybe that's his retirement plan. Who knows? It's not like he's got a 401k.
Quite possibly. And I think the reason that he was able to lift the hammer when he wasn't able to lift it before, like you said, he budged it a little bit, IG, was the fact that he was holding onto a secret that Bucky had killed Tony Stark's parents. And now that was kind of off the ledger, he was now worthy to wield the hammer. I thought that was kind of a nice callback to Age of Ultron, the fact that he was able to do it when he wasn't before. Ryan, the heroes are beaten and battered, and Thanos reveals not only his powerful Black Order, but his massive army. They're outnumbered. They're undermanned. Did you think Thanos may have this at any point, and maybe the MCU continued on another timeline?
No, it definitely didn't, but I was curious as to how they were going to resolve it. And it was kind of a great kind of geeking out kind of moment for everybody, you know, when they all show up. You know, again, logistical issues aside, like why, like that, you know, Thanos just kind of hung out and was like, all right, I'll let you guys have your moment instead of attacking right away. And it was like, it was kind of funny because we make fun of these movies for having, you know, this massive third act, you know, CGI battle with like, you know, just random undefinable soldiers. And so what do? They take the ones from, you know, from the first movie and the first Avengers movie and the ones from Infinity War and just combine forces to give us just massive army of random CGI, you know, barely put together bad guys to fight. So I kind of, but you know, at the end of the day, I think it works. The way the battle works is great, and we get to see all the heroes in their little brief moments that they all get their chance to shine a little bit. So I guess it makes sense. And I did like the way the scene played out. It's where I typically hate all these like third act battles. This one actually works pretty well, and it's epic. And again, really everybody gets a minute to shine. So I really did enjoy this in spite of the fact that we had, you know, it's like not one, but two groups of CGI baddies for them to face.
Well, and we're going into the Battle for Winterfell, which is the battle's pretty much going to last the whole episode, and I really could have watched a movie of just this fight. I was that excited as those yellow portals began to open and everyone we lost strolled through. Billions of dollars of Disney property was just standing there tall against the powers of evil. And it was one of the most epic showdowns I've ever seen in a superhero film. All the heroes were on deck and kicking ass, and we even got a slight heartwarming reunion between Iron Man and Spider-Man, which I loved. IG, where was that battle on the scale of things for you? Was it everything you dreamed of? The final showdown? Was it a comic come to life? And do you think we could have snuck in some surprises there? Maybe some Fox characters or maybe an X-Men or two?
That's the thing that I thought was missing, is like we needed a Wolverine or Mr. Fantastic or a Human Torch or something like that. Human Torch would have been the perfect one, especially if they just put in a CGI Human Torch that looked exactly like Chris Evans when he was doing it. that would have like been absolutely hilarious, and I would have been just on board for that. But yeah, I mean, we've got these properties, and they need to start using them. They need to start intertwining things, because if they go off and make pure X-Men or pure Fantastic Four things and then don't include some of what they've spent the last 11 years building, I think they're missing out on their own ability to do things. But yeah, that was a missed opportunity, but there was just great things, and it was literally everything I could have hoped for in a battle with CGI, like Ryan says. But how are you going to create something this way with this much gravitas without going heavy into the CGI? You just can't. There aren't enough trained actors that you can get out to do things that are going to look as good as it did here. It was really, really, really well done.
It really, to me, you couldn't wipe the smile off my face during that battle when they all started to come out. And of course, we had to lead off with Black Panther, who I absolutely love. It was great. I don't want to look like a GIF moment like that in the mouth, but how great would it have been? You know, the deal was on the table. It was close. We kept hearing that they're going to use all these heroes. How great would it have been if we would have had some Netflix heroes show up, or just one line from Ryan Reynolds as he popped through and just started kicking it? We wouldn't even have to see him again, but a little bit of Deadpool action in the middle of that battle would have capped it off. It would have made it feel whole again, because that's what we need from the MCU. We need it to be whole. We need all these characters to come back home. Enough of this Sony nonsense with Spider-Man and everything being separate. It needs to be one big family again, and Disney has the finances to make that happen, and they should. I also love the fact that Scarlet Witch almost defeated Thanos by herself. She was pissed, and she let it show. But things kind of started going sideways, and Captain Marvel showed up and made the save flying through the ship. It was an amazingly heroic moment, Ryan, and torch stealing. But does Captain Marvel come across a little OP for you, a little overpowered, maybe perhaps a little too Superman-like?
Yeah, that's going to be an issue moving forward, because especially between this movie and that, we don't really know what her weaknesses are. And I know that there are some established kind of weaknesses in the comics, but they really don't dive into that at all. It is almost like she just is too powerful, and it may be a problem moving forward. But you know, who knows? You know, if they keep her in the kind of cosmic realm, they're opponents of close to equal caliber, that maybe she can have something to work with. But otherwise, it does seem like on this kind of Earth battle that, yeah, here she comes, and she's just, you know, who needs anyone else? Like everyone, like in fact, they should have just called her immediately. Like she should have been on her way. I don't know why she wasn't among the team, you know, to go get the stones. Like, not like they couldn't use a few extra days. So I just kind of kept wondering, like, why isn't she just everywhere with this? Like, she's so powerful that you just call her for anything. Why have anybody do anything else? But you know, I guess we'll see how they make this work moving forward, because she's clearly going to be a huge part of the, you know, kind of phase 4 coming up.
Yeah, Thanos gave the order, and he was just bombarding hero and villain alike. He was raining fire on everybody, and she shows up and she saves the day. Kim, we had a strong female presence. It was great during the battle, but there was a moment in the fight that mirrored the one in Infinity War, which I called the girl power scene. We did it again this one, but it was on a much grander scale. Did it feel slightly forced to you?
I hated it. Everything about that scene just made my skin crawl. Like, there's this massive battle going on, but here's all the women in the corner, and they're all like, oh, we're going to stand together. You know, it irritated the absolute living snot out of me. I did not like that at all.
IG?
Yeah, I'm right with Kim. It was like, oh, how? They were apparently all over the battlefield, right? If you kind of watch the battle happening, you got Okoye over there fighting people, stabbing people with her spear. You got Pepper in her brand new iron outfit flying around with Tony Stark fighting back to back with him. Everybody's off doing their own thing, and then just magically, they're all right together within 3 feet of each other. And it's really funny, because I don't know if anybody has ever watched. I know we've talked about them before, the pitch meetings from Screen Rant with another Ryan George. They did one for this, and the guy was like, well, why are they there? And the answer was, I'm going to need you to get all the way up off my back about this, just because it is. And it's true, because, like, why are they all together? Why is it important that all the women are standing together? It's not. And I think it actually did a disservice to the movie to do it, because they were kicking ass individually all over the battlefield before that. And I was marking out the whole time going, shit, look at Okoye go. Damn, look at that outfit Pepper's got. That's hot. Everything. I was really into it. And then they did that, and I'm like, what the hell was that? That's all I could think when they did it. What the hell was that?
Ryan uses the expression too on the nose, and that was way too on the nose. I love the female presence in the Marvel universe now, and there's not a female superhero that I don't like. I wasn't the biggest fan of Pepper Potts, but her in that rescue outfit was just awesome. You know, I was marking out to all of it, and I just didn't understand that. In the last movie, it worked because they all ended up, there was only 2 or 3 of them, and they ended up down in a trench, and they were helping each other. And I thought that was a badass moment. And this was just... It just paled in comparison, even though it was on a much larger scale. But it may open the door for an all-female Avengers team called A-Force. Ryan, is that something you'd be interested in seeing?
Sure, if it's well written and it's done right, absolutely. I think they do have some strong female characters in the MCU at this point. And so, you know, like with any of it, if it's a good movie, I'm in. You know, the more diversity and kind of inclusiveness that we get in these movies, the better. So if, you know, kind of like, DC's got Birds of Prey coming out, and, you know, if it's a good movie, it's great. And you know, more the merrier. You know, if you can appeal to greater audiences and bring in more people, you know, better for everybody, because, you know, more people get jobs, more people get writing jobs, more acting jobs, more movies, and, you know, all of our kind of appetites are satisfied. So if you know, as long as they bring in the right people, I'm more than excited and happy to see that movie.
I'm kind of in the same boat when it comes to superhero properties. I don't think you can get enough of them as long as they're good. Now, not all of them are going to be good, and I don't think you should make less of them. And that's where I think Disney is making a huge mistake with the Star Wars properties by scaling back, or at least saying they're going to scale back, because you're going to stumble. But for the most part, there's a built-in audience. And as long as it's good, I will be there every single time, every single opening night, throwing my money down on the counter. After a crazy chase and struggle for the Ironfinity Gauntlet, which included help from everyone from Black Panther to Spider-Man, it only ends up back in Thanos' grasp. And we get the false snap heard around the world. Kim, did you groan in the theater, just say, shit, this is going to happen again?
Oh, absolutely. I thought, well, you know, maybe this was supposed to happen. Maybe that narrative of Thanos was, you know, right on par. But, you know, you notice, maybe I noticed, maybe other people didn't, but when he raises his hand and they start to kind of zoom in on him as he's getting ready to snap, there's no glowing coming from any stones. So I knew there was something there. And it was such an intense moment, you know, with the fight and everything, that I think that they needed that brief pause of, you know, for everyone to kind of catch their breath before the heroes kind of take back over.
Can one of you explain to me how he ended up with the gems? Because I'm completely at a loss.
The trick here that I'm really confused about, and the thing that messed me up, all right, so each time Thanos got another gem and dropped it into the gauntlet, right? Surge of power, and he's like, kind of hulking up. And then when he gets it initially here, he puts it on, the stones are in it, and then you can see the power going into him. So you get all this when stuff is going in, but when the stones come out, nothing happens. Like, you don't feel the loss of power from the stones leaving. That's a strange, weird thing that it's like he didn't even notice they were gone. And to answer your question there, Cinik, the way it worked is I think the gauntlet was designed to work with Iron Man, because it is the Iron Man gauntlet holding the Infinity Stones. So the fact that Iron Man was there and it's all nanotech and everything, that's how the thing's able to adjust and get, you know, from Hulk size to Thanos size to Tony Stark size. It's designed to work with him. So if he comes in contact with it, it's just going to shift all the stones into him.
Okay, I thought that was really poorly explained during the course of the movie.
It wasn't explained. It was just kind of interpreted.
Yeah, Tony ends up with the gems and speaks those words that started it all for all of us. I am Iron Man. Just before he snaps Thanos and the rest of his army out of existence. But it was at the cost of his life. After goodbyes with Peter, Rhodey, and Pepper, we jump to his funeral and every hero is there. But a very familiar young man is there as well from Iron Man 3. So we have, Ryan, we have Pepper, we have now his daughter, and we have his protege from Iron Man 3, Harley. Who do you think is most likely in line to inherit the Iron Man mantle?
I don't know. I really hope it's not Pepper. I won't go see that movie unless they cast a new actress. I don't know. Honestly, I would say leave it alone. You've got Rhodey, so maybe do some, you know, if you want to do something with War Machine, great. Or, you know, I love Don Cheadle as an actor, and I'd definitely be, you know, in line day one to see a War Machine movie. But I, you know, also think maybe it's time to kind of leave the character alone for a while, until you kind of have the right story. But otherwise, yeah, I'd go with Rhodey. Please don't give me a Gwyneth Paltrow movie, because I will not go see it.
Not to burst your bubble, but Pepper Potts does become her own comic legend of Iron Man, and she does assume that role, or at least tries to. I'll watch it. I just don't feel like it would have the same effect, as RDJ has with that character. I think there's such a tight bond with everybody, and I think that he's so believable. Like when he dies, there's not a dry eye in the house. I heard grown men behind me sniffling, and I heard little kids and women, and it was one of those moments where I'm kind of looking around. I'm like, oh, damn it, I don't know if there is anyone that's capable of handling that role. It's been so built up over the last decade.
Yeah, rather than recast Tony Stark, if they're going to recast the character at least, then I think I would be okay with that. But the MCU, all those years ago, I remember us talking about these movies and what they meant to us and where could they go with them. And it all started with Tony Stark. Was it a fitting goodbye? It started with him. Should it end with him?
There could have been no more fitting goodbye for Tony Stark than what they did here. Because, we remember back to the first Avengers movie and Captain America telling him, you're not going to be the one to make the sacrifice play and everything. And it's literally what he did. He made the sacrifice play to win the entire game. And to watch him go out as heroically, and then right as his taking his dying breaths for Pepper to tell him, we're going to be okay, you can go rest, is literally some things that have been said to people as they're dying. Like it was said from my mother to my father. It was said from my wife to her grandmother. And man, did it just choke me up to no end when that was said. And it's true. He made the biggest sacrifice that anyone could have made, and he did it knowing that he's likely going to die doing it. And it was amazing to watch him say, I am Iron Man, one more time, snap his fingers, and that's it. Like, Thanos' threat is all over.
In Iron Man 1, when he gets up and he's eating his burger and he goes in front of, all the press and whatnot, and they're kind of questioning, is Tony Stark Iron Man? And he gets up and he says it that very first time in front of everybody, so nonchalantly, so cocky, such an arrogant fool who only cared about himself to, fast forward to the ending of this movie, and now he has come full circle. He's older, he's wiser, he's said his goodbyes to his family. He made sure that everyone was okay, including Peter Parker's character, to just humble, and completely selfless. I just thought that was such a fabulous moment. It was so well done. I just loved it.
Ryan, we are both huge fans of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. Do we need Thor as part of the team going forward?
Absolutely. Well, we don't need him, but I'm on board. I loved the first one. I thought the second one didn't hit the mark for me. Something wasn't working for it. I think it was more the story than anything else, because it still did the comedy well. But it was something I never expected. But it was one of those, like, when I realized that seems to be where they're going, it's like, that's perfect. Like, I love the tension between he and Star-Lord. I think since they are going the comedy route, and I love his dynamic with Rocket. And so since they are going the comedy route, I'm into it. So yeah, do we need him in Guardians? Probably not, but I'm totally, but at the same time, like, I don't, I didn't know that we needed another Thor standalone movie. So yeah, I'm in.
Yeah, I agree. But after Ragnarok, I wish we could have seen more Thor standalone movies. I love Ragnarok that much. Him being part of the new Asgardians of the Galaxy, I guess, would work, especially if him and Star-Lord can find some sort of even footing and become just doofus buddies, just play off of each other rather than be in conflict. I felt like they dumped on Star-Lord a little bit in this movie, and it kind of made me feel bad, not only for Star-Lord the character, but for Chris Pratt, because he put his body through so much to become this superhero. I mean, if you remember Fat Eddie Dwyer from Parks and Rec to what he is now, the guy's made himself into a superhero. Yeah, you want to be laughed with and laughed at to an extent, but you don't want to be the joke. I kind of hope they move away from that a little bit. Emotional ties aside, he sees Gamora, he runs over, he doesn't realize it's not the same chick, and then he gets kneed in the nuts, and she's like, really? I fell for this guy? I just kind of felt bad for him overall. But in the end, Cap goes back in time to reset the stones to their former places and times, and decides to stay and live his life with Peggy Carter, only to return as a much older gentleman, and he gives Sam the shield, which is another callback to the comics. Kim, your thoughts on the closing scene, the movie and your rating.
I think there's still a lot of loose ends that need to be tied up for me. I still don't understand how Hawkeye and the Hulk were able to just hold an Infinity Stone all willy-nilly, like it's no big frickin' deal. I've seen the movie 3 times now. I still don't know where Gamora went. I know she's probably in an alternate timeline and that wasn't a part of this narrative, but, it wasn't explained. She wasn't at, the Tony Stark funeral. Even though the timing of the movie, like the first 10-15 minutes was basically all of the preview trailers and could have ended with Thanos dying, and then it was like very slow, for about an hour and a half and just building up, I guess, how depressed everybody is. And Captain Marvel in the beginning saying, you're not going to see me for a long time. And then fast forward 5 years, who got a hold of her? Who told her to come back and that this would be the time and place that this was going to happen? There's still some questions for me that haven't really truly been answered. Hopefully they'll kind of button that up in the future. But for me, I bawled like a baby all 3 times I saw it. And I think it was a fabulous movie and a great send-off and a good way to kind of earmark those particular characters and to, kind of give them the, Cap and Iron Man and Black Widow's character I never really gave 2 cans of corn about, but to kind of earmark them and to give that the closure that it needs. I'd still give it a 10. I loved it.
The last scene was great because I was wondering, I think we all thought that Cap would be the one to get it in the end, and it was a great way to give a kind of satisfying conclusion to the character. So it's actually in not kind of sacrificing himself, it was a bit of a surprise. I think as a movie, it was a great movie. I liked it a lot more than Infinity War, actually. I had a bunch of problems. The only issue I think with this is that it's definitely not a standalone movie. I think it not only requires Infinity War, which I think in itself Infinity War was actually a pretty good standalone. If you just ended it there, great. The hero Thanos wins in the end and it's over. So in that way I think it was a better standalone movie. I think this one requires not only Infinity War but really knowledge and engagement with 21 movies. And so in that way maybe that's a little bit of a knock on it, but I think it is an amazing culmination of all those movies, and I think it worked far better than I think anybody would expect. And I think all of the callbacks were amazing. The fact that it really, even more than Infinity War, included just every character. I mean, dozens of characters that we just didn't expect would be in this movie, and did it in a way that really fit the narrative and continued to tell the story and really helped complete storylines for a number of characters. So I think, as the close of this kind of 22, arc, or 22 arc story, I think it was really, really strong. It had the emotional beats, and I think it's really cohesive. It was funny when it needed to be funny. It gave you the feels when it needed to give you the feels. Yeah, there are a million things that we can nitpick about it, and even though I'm the guy that typically is the one nitpicking, I kind of made the decision at some point. It's like, look, we're just going to go with it. The movie doesn't want you to sit down and kind of do the math and really understand the science. I think it wants you to just live in it and kind of feel what's going on, and I chose to do that. So if I were to give it a rating, I think 9 out of 10. Really, really good, really strong movie. Excited to see it again, though it feels every bit of those 3 hours you feel it. But otherwise, great movie and great finish to end to this saga so far.
So I want to take a moment and talk about, again, where it all started. And really where it all started was Jon Favreau, right? He directed the first Iron Man movie and then starred in many of these as Happy Hogan. And as many heartbreaking moments and cries that I got in this movie, not one to me was bigger than when he was talking to young Morgan Stark, who wanted a cheeseburger, and he's going to get her all the cheeseburgers she wants. And just kind of having that moment with Jon Favreau, who started all of this, who did the first Iron Man movie, who's had a part in producing many of these films, to be there and to have that moment was amazing. And I know we didn't talk about that in the full review, but it really sealed the deal on this movie for me. And the ceiling is this movie's a 10. It may require you to have knowledge of 21 other movies. That's fine. Most of us that are really invested in this are going to have that knowledge and be invested that deeply. Even Thor: The Dark World, that most of us really just don't have a fond taste on our mouth for, we've probably all still seen it at least twice, just to make sure we didn't like it the first time. And it's not that terrible of a movie to begin with. It's not great compared to the other MCU movies. That's where we land on this. But this movie is a 10. It hits you emotionally. It is comically relevant and hilarious at times when it needs to be, to keep you from drifting off or feeling like you needed to go. Like, I drank, because I went to a theater that had bistro where you just push the button and they bring drinks to you. So, like, I drank 3 sodas and didn't feel like I had to pee until the moment the credits were rolling. And I'm like, oh my God, I have to pee so bad because I had 3 huge drinks during the movie. But my body was working with me through all 3 hours of it, and I didn't have to get up once because this movie was that good. It was that amazing. I didn't feel myself drifting off. Yeah, there were times where it drug, but I don't remember any movie in the history of movie making that hasn't had moments of dragging. And this had just moments, just a couple of little things. Are there problems with it? Absolutely. Are there things that I don't like about it? You bet there are. Do they detract away from my 10 score? Not a chance. It's a great movie, and if you like superheroes, this is what everything should hope to be when it makes a superhero movie.
Well, the compass points to Cap being the one to self-sacrifice and Tony to kind of go on and live his life, and that's exactly what we didn't get, and I love that. I love the kind of juxtaposition of the two, where Cap got to go back and live his life that he missed out on because he was, trapped in ice because he was trying to save the world, and Tony had a chance at a life and gave it up to save the world. I thought that was just simply amazing. I thought it was ingenious. I'll miss the original team, even Hawkeye and Black Widow. They started it all out so long ago, 11 years ago. And if you look at that, you look at the commitment that they made to these movies, these actors. We can't even get people to stay for more than 2 movies in the DC universe. You got to give a huge thank you to the actors and Kevin Feige for getting this all together. I mean, it was the perfect goodbye for characters that kind of felt like family over the years. Robert Downey Jr. will always be the face of the MCU. Evans and Helmsworth, not that far behind him. The action scenes, the fight scenes, the character moments, the fan service moments were all on point in this movie. The Russos are right up there with James Gunn and Favreau as far as understanding the superhero genre. Although I felt the movie ran a little long, and unlike IG, I definitely had to pee by the end of it. I'll sit through it repeatedly. Now I'm going to give it a 9, and I'm only taking points off for the length, the Hulk, and I wanted some surprises that we didn't get. And the fact that in the last movie, they claimed all the damage done in the first movie was permanent, and they retconned just about everything that happened in Infinity War, which bothered me a little bit. It's as near perfect of a superhero movie, especially a group team movie, that I think we're ever going to get.
And that's it for this episode of the Cinik Radio Podcast. I'm Igrihe. We had a great time bringing you this week's show. Please send all your comments, questions, concerns, and any crazy news stories from your neck of the woods to CINIKRADIO@gmail.com. Find us on the internet at CINIKRADIO.com. Look for us on Facebook at Facebook.com/CINIKRADIO, and find us on Twitter at CINIKRADIO. Continue to like, listen, subscribe, and share this with all your friends and family. And until next time, don't get captured.
Follow the podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and at CINIKRADIO.com. Available for download on iTunes.